I had two daughters. My first one was about 8 or 9 years when I came to PepsiCo. My second one was 9 months old when I joined PepsiCo.
Wow.
And so, and I was in the middle of this large-scale transformation of the company from 94 to 2000, working 24/7. So basically, I decided that come, like 5 o'clock, my kids are allowed to come to work and hang around. They're allowed to play, they're allowed to sleep in my office, do whatever. That's the price of having me work at PepsiCo. Because if I couldn't go home and take care of the kids, my office was going to become the place where they were going to hang out.
What level were you? This is before you were CEO.
No, well before I was CEO. I was head of corporate strategy.
And
I was
your
reporting
bosses
to the
were okay
CEO.
with that?
Beg your pardon?
Your bosses were okay with that?
Did they have a choice? I mean, look, if you want me, that's the price of having me. All right? And it comes down to, if you establish a niche for yourself that you're competent, and make yourself indispensable based on competence, what can they do without you? If they didn't want me because they didn't want kids running around, so get somebody else. Get a guy who couldn't do the job as well. So I was okay with that. So if you wanted me, my kids were going to be around. If my kids' school called and said, oh, your daughter's got a sprained ankle, I was going to leave and go to Sacred Heart
yes.
to look at that sprained ankle. That's the price of having me. And it worked.
Plan our lives meticulously so we can be decent parents. But if you ask our daughters, I'm not sure they will say that I've been a good mom. I'm not sure. And I try all kinds of coping mechanisms. I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened when my daughter went to Catholic school, Convent of Sacred Heart. And every Wednesday morning, they have class coffee with mothers. Class coffee with mothers for a working woman. How is it going to work? How am I going to take off 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings to go for a class coffee? So I miss most class coffees. My daughter would come home and she'll say, list of all the mothers that were there and you were not their mom. First few times I would die with guilt. But I developed coping mechanisms. I called the school and I said, give me a list of mothers who were not there. So when she came home in the evening, she'd say, you were not there, you were not there. I said, Mrs. Rag wasn't there, Mrs. So-and-so wasn't there. So I'm not the only bad mother. You have to cope because you die with guilt. You just die with guilt. My observation, David, is that the biological clock and the career clock are in total conflict with each other. Total, complete conflict. When you have to have kids, you have to build your career. My father passed away many, many years ago. My mom lives in India. And I went home to spend time with her. And every 2 minutes, some stranger would show up home. And my mom would say, this is the neighbor's fourth cousin. Come and say hello. And I say, Mom, I'm here on vacation. I want to rest. And she'd say, you may come here for 4 days and leave, but I have to live with these people. So you better show up and be on display. So I was dressed, like I was going to a party morning to evening just to say hello to people. But the irony of it was they would come in, they'd say, oh, so this is the daughter. And then they'd blow past me in 30 seconds and go to my mom and say, you are so wonderful, you gave birth to this child, it's you, that's great. So my mom would just sit there taking all these compliments. At that point, and she's a very humble woman, but she loved this. So at that time, it occurred to me that every person is either a product or a victim of their upbringing. So I came back and I said, look, I have, at that time, between my direct reports and one more level, I had 27 of them. I said, all of these people who run PepsiCo are in fact the products of their upbringing. So I owe their parents a thank you. So I wrote to every one of the parents a standard paragraph explaining why I was writing to them. And then I wrote very tailored 2 or 3 paragraphs about their son or daughter, thanking them for the gift of their child to Pep. The emotion that is evoked has been unbelievable. And I write to them now once a year since then. But the emotion that's evoked is unbelievable. They'll write me notes. Dear Indra, I just went to the store, I saw this. Maybe you should talk to my son to fix this. It is this private dialogue I have with the parents. They write to me about everything. I saw you on Squawk Box. I loved what you said. Bless you. I went to church and said a prayer for you. You know what? It's a private dialogue I have with parents, and I think it increases the commitment of the executives to PepsiCo, because it's brought the whole family in. We always wrote to spouses, that's a PepsiCo tradition, but now we brought the parents in. And I say this to you because, remember I talked to you about ruling the company with heart, head and hands? This is the heart part. I've always talked about my 5 C's model, and let me talk about them again. The first is competency. I think anybody who wants to be a future leader should have a hip pocket skill that everybody looks at and says, XYZ is the go-to person for that skill. Because unless you're really known for something, and not just as a generalist, you don't stand out from the pack. But in order to be competent at something, you've got to be a lifelong student, because you've got to constantly refine your knowledge of that subject so that you remain ahead and abreast of everything that goes on in that field first. The second I'd say is courage and confidence. It's a pair. You can be very, very competent, but if you're not willing to speak out, if you're not willing to have the confidence based on your knowledge, what's the point, right? You just roll over. So courage and confidence are very important. The third is communication skills. You cannot overinvest in communication skills, written and oral communications, because as a leader, you constantly have to mobilize the troops. I can tell you when I first came to the United States, I used to debate and I used to be on debating teams, but I used to speak so fast because culturally I grew up in an environment where people spoke very fast. Fortunately, Yale had a requirement that unless you passed the communications course, you couldn't graduate from the first year to the second year in business school. I flunked the first time I took the communications course. So over summer, I took it again, which was the best thing that happened because I learned to sync my brain with my output from my mouth, and so I started to slow down what I was saying. Huge difference. So I'd encourage all of you, invest in communication skills, critically important. The fourth skill I'd say is consistency. It's important that leaders are consistent. You can change your mind, but change your mind against a consistent framework, because if you're not consistent, people are always second guessing what you're doing. So be consistent. And the last skill is your compass. Integrity is critical in this job. You can be competent, you can be courageous, have confidence, be a great communicator, be consistent. But if you don't have integrity, if that compass doesn't point true north, everything comes crashing down, as we've seen in recent times. So again, it's the 5C model, and that's what I've operated against for all my life.